Welcome. You know, the places we live, the communities around us, they're shaped by all sorts of forces, some obvious, some hidden.
Hmm.
Today, we're doing a deep dive into one of those more localized forces right here in Los Angeles, the Culver City Boys.
Right, a Mexican-American street gang with a long history here.
Exactly. We've gathered some information, historical bits, their reported activities, even some complex legal stuff.
Now, the idea is really just to get a clearer picture, understand this group a bit better based on the sources we have.
Yeah, cut through the assumptions. So our info points to origins in Mar Vista, LA.
That's right, Mar Vista. And they've been around roughly since the 1960s, so decades of history.
Okay, let's start with the name. Culver City Boys. Seems straightforward,
Uh-huh.
but we also see Culver City 13 or CCB 13. What's that 13 about? Is that significant?
Oh, definitely. That 13, you see it a lot with Serrano gangs in Southern California.
Saying no southern, right?
Exactly. And it signals an allegiance, or at least a historical connection, to the Mexican mafia prison gang, La M.
Ah, okay. So local roots in Culver City, or rather Mar Vista.
Right. Originally Mar Vista, which is in L.A., not Culver City proper, interestingly.
But also connected to this larger statewide structure. And their territory is listed as the Los Angeles Westside.
Yeah, the broader West Side.
We even saw a note about their tag, their graffiti, showing up under the 405 freeway.
Yeah, that's classic territorial marking, asserting presence, beyond just their core neighborhood. It's like a visible claim.
Right. So that covers who they are and roughly where. Now, the activities reported, it's a pretty stark list.
It is. The sources mention murder, drug trafficking, extortion.
Assault, auto theft, robbery, these are very serious crimes.
Very serious. And again, this is based on reported incidents, legal documents, things like that. It paints a picture of significant criminal enterprise.
And it's not just what they do, but who they align with and who they oppose. We already mentioned the Mexican mafia connection as an ally.
Uh-huh. The primary known ally, according to these sources.
What does that kind of alliance mean, practically speaking, for a street gang?
Well, LAM has huge influence, especially within the California prison system, but also on the streets.
Okay.
So an alliance can mean protection inside prison, maybe access to drug networks, sometimes even orders or taxes flowing between the prison gang and the street gang. It's complex.
And on the flip side, the rivals. It's
Yeah.
a list of other local gangs. Santa Monica 13, 18th Street.
Right, the 18th Street Gang is a major, widespread rival for many Serrano groups.
Venice Shoreline Crips and Venice 13. That sounds like a crowded, potentially volatile situation on the west side.
It absolutely is. These rivalries are often long-standing, rooted in territory, respect, specific incidents that escalate over time.
Decades sometimes.
Oh, easily. And with territories so close together on the west side, friction is almost inevitable. The intensity might ebb and flow, but the underlying tension is usually there.
Now, things get interesting when we look at their presence over time, specifically around the Mar Vista Gardens housing projects.
Yeah, there was apparently a significant shift.
Our sources say by 2003, stricter rules in the projects, more police around. It led to many members leaving that specific area.
Right. When the environment gets tougher, more policed, groups adapt or move, increased enforcement, maybe stricter housing rules. It makes it harder to operate openly, so you see a dispersal.
Yeah.
But crucially, dispersal doesn't mean disappearance.
Right. And part of that pressure was a civil injunction enforced by the LAPD. Explain that a bit. What does a civil injunction actually do to gang members?
Okay, so imagine a specific zone, like around Mar Vista Gardens. The injunction names specific individuals identified as Culver City Boys members,
Gotcha.
and it forbids them from doing certain things inside that zone. Things like associating with other known members in public, wearing gang colors, sometimes even being out past a curfew.
So it's about disrupting their ability to function as a gang in that specific place.
Exactly. Disrupting organization, communication, intimidation, crime, aiming to make the area safer for residents. It's like targeted restrictions for specific people in a specific area.
But as you said, dispersal doesn't mean disappearance. The sources are clear. Despite the injunction and police pressure, the gang remains active.
Yeah, it's like squeezing a balloon, right?
Hi.
You put pressure here, the activity bulges out somewhere else or it goes underground, becomes less visible, they adapt.
And these injunctions, they weren't just accepted, were they? There were legal challenges.
Oh yeah, there were challenges arguing they were unconstitutional.
On what grounds, typically?
Usually arguments about due process, like, are people being restricted based on reputation rather than proven current actions? Also, freedom of association. Can the government stop people from hanging out together?
Mm.
It's a real balancing act between ensuring public safety and protecting individual civil liberties. Very complex legal ground.
And beyond the injunction itself, there was this other major legal event, a class action lawsuit.
Right, this was big. Alleged gang members sued the city of Los Angeles over curfews imposed on suspected members.
And they settled.
They settled for a substantial amount, $30
Yeah.
million.
$30 million. Wow. What does a settlement that large signal?
Well, it often signals that the city recognized some significant legal risks, that the plaintiffs, the alleged members, had a strong case that their rights might have been violated by how these curfews were applied.
Maybe overly broad or not enough due process?
Potentially, yes.
Hmm.
It suggests the city saw merit in the arguments against their practices, enough to warrant a large settlement rather than risk a trial outcome.
And the use of that money is fascinating. It wasn't just damages paid out.
No, this is key. The $30 million was specifically designated for job training and apprenticeships for the members involved in the suit.
So shifting from purely punitive or restrictive measures to investment in alternatives.
Exactly. It reflects a philosophy that you need to address root causes like lack of economic opportunity, not just the symptoms of gang activity.
Offering a pathway out through legitimate work and skills.
That's the hope. Providing alternatives, trying to break that cycle of crime and poverty that often fuels gang involvement.
And this was fairly recent. The settlement was 2017. The info retrieved in 2018.
Relatively recent, yes.
Do we know how effective these kinds of programs are long term? Using settlement money for job training.
That is the $1 million, or I guess $30 million question.
Right.
The data on long-term effectiveness of various intervention programs is mixed and complex. Success often depends on many factors: the quality of the training, the local job market, support systems, and, critically, the individual's readiness to change.
It's not a magic bullet.
Definitely not. But it represents a shift towards recognizing socio-economic factors as part of the problem and potentially part of the solution.
Now, for anyone listening who wants to really dig into the weeds on this,
Okay.
the sources we drew from are pretty detailed. There are references to specific court cases, People v. Robles, Reyes, de la Trinidad,
Yeah, legal documents, appeals court decisions.
magazine articles like one called King of the North, another from the LA City Beat, Gangsters Paradise Lost.
Journalistic accounts, offering on-the-ground perspective sometimes.
Information from the LA City Attorney's website, even a DEA press release is mentioned. Lots of different angles.
Absolutely. Court records, news reports, official city sources, law enforcement docs. It provides a pretty well-rounded, though complex picture when taken together.
And we should mention, the compilation we worked from seems to trace back to the Wikipedia page for the Culver City Boys.
Right, which can be a great starting point.
But the key is those underlying sources it cites, right? That's where the verification happens.
Exactly. Wikipedia aggregates, but the strength is in the cited sources. And in this case, the cited sources seem quite extensive: court documents, established news outlets, government sites.
So wrapping this up then, we've looked at the Culver City Boys, their likely origins in Mar Vista, the scope of their reported activities, their connections, like with the Mexican mafia,
And the rivals, too.
the impact of things like police pressure and civil injunctions in places like Mar Vista Gardens.
And how the gang seems to persist despite those pressures.
And then these significant legal battles culminating in that $30 million settlement aimed at job training.
Yeah, it really covers a lot of ground. The history, the crime, the enforcement, and the attempts at intervention.
It paints a picture of a gang that's deeply embedded, facing pressures, adapting. It's a snapshot of a much larger dynamic, really.
It really is. You see the interplay of community factors, gang culture, law enforcement strategies, legal challenges.
Yeah.
It's a microcosm of issues faced in many urban areas.
So the final thought for you listening, thinking about everything we've touched on, the law enforcement tactics, the social factors, these attempts to create opportunities. What does the story of the Culver City Boys, as we piece it together, tell you about the challenges and maybe the potential paths forward when dealing with gangs and trying to foster community development in our cities?
Yeah, it makes you consider the balance, doesn't it, between suppression and opportunity.
And how interconnected all these different pieces truly are. Something to think about.